At this stage, we want to account for the shifting landscape of African Pentecostalism. Why are there changes? Why is Pentecostalism movement appearing to be adopting new ways of conducting their ecclesiastical discourses? I begin by saying that Waliboko in his publication, the Nigerian scholar Waliboko in his publication 2017 has pontificated that the shifting landscape of African Pentecostalism, a phenomenon where their theologies and practices have changed in the 21st century, will shape the future direction of normative Christianity in the tropical Africa. In other words, the mainland churches are already feeling the weight of African Pentecostalism as their exuberant and energetic theologies, spiced with African diets of communality, are reverberating across the African landmass, and the rapid tempo cannot be slowed down. You cannot slow the rapid tempo. It's too much. Waliboko, in his 2017 publications, views the future as wide open and pregnant with the possibilities of a new movement that will go beyond African Pentecostalism itself. He says, I quote, "A prayer for African Pentecostals is not your grandfather's fare. It is highly engaged and involves a stupendous amount of energy. The Pentecostal aesthetic of prayer is an eruption of sensibilities, sensory motor skills, practical wisdom, and deep emotions for conveying everyday needs to the heavens and bridging the gap between the visible and invisible realms. Prayer is oral theology, biblical texts, ritual practices, and spontaneous and heady spirituality carried by and articulated through the body. Prayer is the embodiment, display, and articulation of ideas, hopes, fears, habits, and traditions, and is a key feature of African Pentecostalism." End of quote. In the Nigerian context, as Waliboko above us views it, the African Pentecostal movement is a very evangelical in orientation, seeking to convert both Muslims and adherents of traditional religions to Christianity, has been seen to be the most active along this line, getting the Muslims and traditional religions to Christianity is the task that Waliboko sees in Nigeria. Not other denomination appears more set to do that task than the African Pentecostalism or Pentecostals who are African and employing some element of African spirituality. Now, this proselytizing and evangelical aspect have been noted as similar to the one in the Kenyan context. The business of whitewashing people into this religion and not deeply converting them. The sense of it when you shout to somebody, you don't teach that person. That element is there across the board. Now, that's what we are calling proselytizing. Another Nigerian scholar, Igboin, in his 2020 publication, asserted that although the so-called classical Pentecostalism revolved around Holy Ghost baptism, personal salvation, exorcism, healing services, and dispensationalism, African Pentecostalism and Neo-Pentecostalism have surpassed these theological streams. As he further argues, that is Igboin, this does not rule out the fact that the origins of Pentecostalism in general was largely associated with politically, economically exploited lot, socially deprived people who were ironically in the world, even though they were in reality cut off from it. In other words, Pentecostalism, like in the rest of Christendom, initially attracted the lowly in society. With time, interestingly, it widened with time because it widened its perspective. And in the analysis, it reached out to everybody, even the high class in society. It reached out. Okay? That's the reality. That is the way it is in the 21st century. It has reached out. As it focuses on socio-economic matters worldwide, that could be one of the reasons it has been able to come out from being seen as for the lowly and even attracting the world to do in society. Scholar Kamarov, in his 2015 publication, explained this shift, why the shift of landscape in African Pentecostalism, why is it the case? I quote him thus: there has also been widespread popular impetus in the early 21st century world toward redefining the role of religion in the civic order, a widespread effort to recover a sense of authenticity and sovereign authority in the world. All this implies there are ongoing structural transformation. Indeed, there is much to suggest that the character of contemporary faith is integral to a reorganization of core components of capitalist modernity as a social formation, a worldwide process that has specific implications for post-colonial Africa. This shift has involved an intensification of some signature features of modern society and an eclipse of others, a process made manifest in the changing ethos and institutional form of liberal democracies across the world. These changes vary in local manifestation, and so, too, does the nature and impact of religious revitalization. End of quote. Similarly, Agbu Kalu, another Nigerian scholar in Pentecostal studies, in his 2018 publication, Ogbukalu pointed out that the big man syndrome emerged after independence and conceived independence as an end in itself, as opposed to being a means to an end. This graduated into the emergence of some chaotic personalities amongst some African Pentecostals. Coupled with this, the prosperity dimension has also become part of the new package. This also goes hand in hand with teachings that emphasize on security against spiritual, and physical forces. According to Gadogo 2020, the shifting landscapes are not without pains and some limited inconveniences. You see, when you are shifting, there must be some inconvenience somewhere. For pockets of infidelity are also experienced amongst African Pentecostals in the 21st century. Now, in building on many samples in post-colonial Kenya, the following comes out, that the moral question among African Pentecostals has also manifested itself through marital infidelity, through spouse swapping, through poor leadership structures, through con artistry, through financial exploitation of the poor people, okay, through even faking miracles, organizing people to do miracles to create an impression they have been healed, and therefore attract people to this healing church. Of course, those are pockets of these, and some are not actually Pentecostals. They could actually be mere cults and new religious movement who are not yet defined as Pentecostals or mainline. And there's also populist sermons that are tailor-made to take you somewhere, not necessarily to heaven, but to indoctrinate you. There's also radicalization. Such pockets of it have also been visible. Now, the shifting landscape in the 21st century Africa, thus, is not without serious setbacks, and sometimes takes on risky trajectories. Furthermore, despite pockets of moral decadence associated with some of its leadership, which would ordinarily hurt African Pentecostalism, more and more people flock there. So the more there are such crises, you may think it will hurt the community of African Pentecostalism, you find more and more people going there. Is it because, as John Beatty said, Africans are notoriously religious? So any religion that comes, it has to get some Africans, because people are thirsting for it. That could be something we may want to ponder and ask ourselves. Could this be out of the desire to quench the metaphysical powers that are believed to influence existential and physical space, as in African religion? Has religion in Africa turned to be the quencher of existential spaces? That's another question. Now, with John Beatty actually, as noted, with John Beatty saying, Africans are notoriously religious, you cannot rule out such fears that people may rush to any religion that comes its way because of that nature of notorious nature of African religiosity, African people and their religiosity. So in short, what I'm saying is that with Beatty, in his publication of 1969, attempting to underline the African worldview as a religious drama, and indeed the indispensability of religion in social spiritual discourses, the power of African Pentecostalism will continue to reverberate across the continent of Africa. So it is not likely to stop as long as we are naturally religious people. In Kenya, the shifting landscape in African Pentecostalism became clear in the 1990s during the economic depression that hit the country. During this depressive moment, the likes of the then pastor and now Bishop Pius Moiro and Pastor Margaret Wanjiro Reta became a member of parliament, hence he is Honorable Bishop, Margaret Wanjiru, and others preached their televised messages of hope. Amidst hopelessness, that was actually 1990s, during the economic depression. People flocked in their churches, and that was a major takeoff. Within a short time, because of our preaching, Kenya has hope. Economy is bad, there is future. People trooped in their churches, and within a very short time, they are some of the biggest churches that in the 21st century, generally, the Pentecostal group are holding 30 to 35% of Kenya's population, which is something great considering that there was a press during the Corona times. The first government of Jomo Kenyatta, 1963 to 78, was also not very keen on them. Moi's time, a bit of it. Kibaki's time, they were already there. They were already out, and some even attempting to dislodge him from power. They were even in politics. As they propounded their televised messages, the likes of Muiro, Wanjiru, or Margaret Wanjiru, those bishops, little did we Kenyans know that through their contextual sermons that addressed what was troubling people those days, little did we know they were winning the nation in their new trajectories. Not wrong, not wrong. The coming of the 21st century found them ripe enough for socio-political influences in the country. During the 2005 national referendum for constitutional change in Kenya, some leading African Pentecostal leaders, those leaders of Pentecostal churches, were overt in opposing the new proposed law, where the government lost 43% versus 57%, where Pentecostal input was there, saying we must oppose this proposal to change the constitution of Kenya, because it's like you are supporting homosexuality indirectly with your Bill of Rights. And that's how these people kept on gaining power. The Pentecostals went on gaining power socially and having gotten a huge crown during the economic depression in Kenya in 1990s and early, we say 1990s. That's when Kenya was between a rock and a hard place, economically speaking. From a participant observer, it was crystal clear that some African Pentecostal leaders could be seen in political rallies as they teamed up with the opposition leaders to oppose the proposed constitutional change of 2005, the so-called Wako Bill. It was opposed by Pentecostals vehemently. So they strongly sought to justify their opposition to the legal changes by appealing to the social, cultural, and theological reasons. Their new trend shows the shift from the rigid evangelicalism to a broad-based and/or liberal theological positions, akin to the emphasis on realized eschatology, meaning present concerns, which is seen in African religiosity, where focus is on realized eschatology, or things that we need to solve now and now, before we focus on what will come later. The business of becoming ancestors starts there. It's not a question of it will come. It starts there, and then it is no wonder that some went on to contest political seats from the civic level to the presidency, and some were even nominated. Some were nominated to various positions, although with minimal victories. Anyway, they were not really winning as such, but some got it. Seeing African Pentecostals addressing thematic issues such as sickness and the way of God, poverty eradication as the agenda for all, God and the healed society, exorcisms and societal healing, and God and prosperity for everyone, was indeed a turning point as the 21st century came closer. Furthermore, there are thematic concerns such as a hopeful nation, as a godly nation, gender issues, as human issues. Some of these themes, and the rejuvenated national economy as a kingdom nation, a kingdom without poverty. Pentecostal speaking such thematic issues, such themes was something of a major change from the mere focus on spirituality, the permanent house, the house God in Christ went to build. That was a major turning point. It was so that show that at the turn of the 21st century, it was now a refreshing moment that clearly showed the change had fully come. It had climaxed completely. The change that began slightly before the end of the 20th century had really matured. In both the change movement had matured, in both the open air spaces and in the media, the gospel of hope and healing became apparent since late 1990s. Furthermore, after President Daniel Arap Moi left the political scene as the president of Kenya on 30th December 2002, and Mwai Kibaki from the opposition was sworn in as the new president, the political role of African Pentecostalism increased. Of course, Kibaki came with more democratic culture, and that is where they were able to swim into action, and actually not just swim, but swim, get immersed completely in the waters of democracy, and swim to the other corner. Some contesting, as I've noted, some supporting openly, some churches saying we don't support this person openly. The churches that looked conservative and so spiritualist, so pietistic, they had adopted a bit more liberal positions. So the Mwai Kibaki era, 2003 to 2013, the 10 years, saw the introduction of Constituency Development Fund, CDF, that began the devolution of funds to the rural areas, to the lower levels of society, yes, to the very bottom, where voters are. In this Constitutional Development Fund, kitties, CDF kitties, each of the 210 parliamentary constituencies were allocated funds, and hardly could one fight a constituency, especially in central Kenya, without an African Pentecostal nominee in these CDF committees. In other words, they were getting influential. They could be trusted to take care of the money coming from the government, to take care of the 210 Kenyan constituencies then. And in one of the 47 devolved governments established in Kenya after the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, one of the Pentecostal leaders became the governor, that is Reverend Moses Akaranga, 2013 to 2017, in Vihiga County of Western Kenya, whilst another leading African Pentecostal pastor became a cabinet minister, that is Reverend Moses Zoro, MP for Karoreni constituency from 2002 to 2007. You can see that. And finally, a cabinet minister during Kibaki time. Having avoided or skewed politics, which they had been dismissing openly as secular and ungodly prior to the 21st century, the socio-political landscape had clearly showed a more vibrant, holistic movement in their new socio-religious discourses. So all that could now be witnessed in a society that looked conservative and not willing to change. The change came in a big way, big boom, and all could see. Everyone who had eyes could see. He who had ears could hear. Now, I continue to say that the socio-political influence of African Pentecostalism in Kenya has remained in the 21st century, and it appears that this rapid tempo will not slow down. Certainly, this shift from conservative evangelicals to a all-rounded religious movement is cooking well from the nethermost depths of the ocean floor rather than from the top stratums, as the lowest level of society seems to have embraced it. This view was further boosted on 7th of January 2021, just the other day, when the United Democratic Alliance Party, now the ruling party, unveiled the ecclesiastical leader of a leading African Pentecostal outfit, the Jesus is Alive ministry, their leader, Bishop Margaret Wanjiru, as the gubernatorial candidate of the capital city of Nairobi. Now, the vacancy for a governor of the city of Nairobi was created after the senators voted in a 27-16 vote to impeach the flamboyant Governor Mike Sonko on 17 December 2021. Although the elections did not take place because of some legal technical reasons, the nomination of the former Deputy Minister for Housing and a Member of Parliament for Starehe constituency 2007 to 2012, Honorable Bishop Margaret Wanjiru, by the influential UDA, further confirmed the shifting landscape of Kenya's African Pentecostalism. So we could see these things have changed. A phenomenon where their social influence is now explicit. Now, the shift from less influential to a very influential religious African Pentecostal outfit can be seen from two prongs. You can look at it from two prongs. Yes, you can look at it from two dimensions. First, the public is no longer complaining that some African Pentecostal leaders are abandoning the sheep and indulging in elective politics, as in the above gubernatorial case. You see, the public perception is also very important. Hence, a level of acceptance is visible amongst the general populace. Second, both the mainland churches and African Pentecostals are not overtly condemning this indulgence of secular politics. That is another one. Amongst African Pentecostal leaders, or any other church leader for that matter, clearly the shifting landscape is visible across the board in the 21st century. So if their churches are not complaining, members are not complaining, they are saying it is, ministry of Jabez, expanded ministry of Jabez. Jabez prayed that God expands his boundaries. And they will tell you the boundaries of our church leaders have been expanded by God, like Jabez, biblical Jabez. So why should you keep on telling us our church leaders, our pastors should just remain here without moving to higher goals? They should carry out bigger tasks for the nation. If they are leading us, why not lead us out there? That's another one. So those are the two prongs I wanted us to think about. In the researchers' interviews, or in my interviews with several well-informed scholars and African Pentecostal leaders, it became clear that the shifting landscape is evident right from the village, those local village churches. First, the religious outfits, which used to call themselves ministries, in the 20th century, renamed themselves as churches, no longer called ministries, but churches. And we have so many we can just cite. You can talk of Priesthood Fellowship Church now under former Pastor JJ, now Bishop Dr. JJ Getahi. It's no longer Priesthood Fellowship Ministry. It's now a church. What more can we say? We can say a lot. Also wearing of clerical collars. We noted that. Yes, we are seeing it. They are wearing clerical collars, clerical shirts. We are seeing all those titles like bishop, not necessarily overseers and apostles. They're also there, but there is a wave, yes, where they are robbing. You find, you may not sometimes tell the difference between the two, the mainland and Pentecostal. Such leadership titles of we've noted reverends, archdeacons, archbishops, bishops, Yeah, of course, this depends on the individual church. Equally, the Refined Gospel Christian Church, which constituted its first congregation on Sunday, 7th December 1987 at Kikuyu Township, Kiambu County, following its registration as an African Pentecostal church in Kenya, had Pastor John Wambu Aweru as its general overseer, or the head. Between 2000 and 2021, the title of the church leader had shifted from senior pastor, overseer, general overseer, bishop to the current position of where Archbishop Dr. John Wambu Aweru is the current head. Yes, he's the current head. By 2021, he was the head, I think, since 2019. The old titles such as overseer, elder, senior, elder, deacon, apostle are already giving way to the new ones, largely taken from the mainline churches. Amongst the vestments that both the African Pentecostals and the mainline churches are wearing today include cassock, amise, alb, cincha, store or store, the chasuble, okay, and all that. For chasuble is the outermost liturgical garment or liturgical vestment worn by clergy for the celebration of the Eucharist among Anglicans, Roman Catholics, and Lutheran churches and other mainline churches. Cassock, the floor-length garment, is also the long priestly garment and is usually black with long sleeves and fits the body closely. The latter is worn by the clergy both as ordinary dress and as a liturgical garment. According to one church elder by name Benson Ngiri from Kagumo Full Gospel Church, a section of African Pentecostal outfits has embraced these vestments, whilst others are still skeptical. Generally, cleric robe is the outer cassock, worn over as the inner garment by bishops, priests, deacons, and monastics. It is sometimes accompanied by scuffia, which is a soft-sided cap worn by monastics or awarded to certain clergy as a mark of honor and or designated recognition. Equally, the outer cassock is a large flowing garment worn over the inner cassock by the clerics. Now, embracing these elements for some of the African Pentecostals points to a shifting theo-ecclesial landscape amongst the African Pentecostals. Now, again, in an interview with another elder, it came out clear that although his specific African Pentecostal church had not embraced the full shift, that is, full FGCK Kagumo, had not embraced the full shifts that others were experiencing, by April 2021, there were clear changes that were evident. So changes are still there, whether you have embraced every change, especially within that area where this church comes, the central Kenya. It was also noted that even though they still have titles for an overseer as a church leader who still runs districts, regions, and the national levels, they are no longer used widely. At the district level, which is basically a sub-county in Kenya's administrative structures, an overseer is a bishop. Okay. Further, this research, the interviewee went on to explain that Kirinyaga County has 3 administrative areas, okay, that serve the African Pentecostal Church. Now, in this case, we are talking about FGCK. So there is already Kirinyaga West, that is D and Kirinyaga Central, under one Bishop Joshua Kiongo, and deputized by Bishop Joseph Mureithi Karugendo. There is also Kirinyaga South District, or you may call it Mwea, under Bishop Dominic Njenga, deputized by Bishop Simon Munene. There is Munene Nyange, and Kirinyaga East District, that is Kichugu, under Bishop Joe, deputized by Bishop Eric Mwangi. Prior to this, the entire Kirinyaga County of Kenya was one of the districts of the Full Gospel Churches of Kenya. In 2019, it had a senior pastor as the head and stayed in their headquarters at Kirwea town. In 2019, the same year, thus, the then senior pastor who had become the honorary bishop in the entire county, Joshua Kiongo Kimani, and two more bishops who came in and joined him to lead the three districts that were created. So you can see that's an example. And you can go on to say that to show the changing circumstances by citing that case of Gospel. Of course, every church has areas, if it's PEFA, we can look at the specific areas, and you can look at every Pentecostal outfit. You can tell which areas have changed because there's shifting of paradigms. Now, let me just end with the case of the Full Gospel Church in Kirinyaga. Other administrative centers akin to the structures in the mainland churches for the FGCK include the Mount Kenya South region, that was by April 2021 headed by a regional overseer, RO, and covered Kirinyaga, Nyeri, Embu, and Laikipia administrative counties of Kenya. The Mount Kenya South region had a regional overseer as the head. In the 21st century, the regional overseer carries the title of a bishop, or should we say archbishop, because there are other bishops now who are in those districts. Of course, these are changes. Although the FGCK had not embraced the leadership title of an archbishop by April 2021, Bishop Silvanus Nyaga from Manyata of Embu County was heading the entire Mount Kenya South region. As observed by some of the interviewees, nobody ever imagined that these titles would be used in FGCK and other African Pentecostal churches. These shifts are largely informed by interactions and cultural diffusion. We can look at it in another lesson, why we account for these changes. Our interest now here is to look at the historicity of the church, the Pentecostal movement. Now, these shifts are largely informed by interactions and cultural diffusion. In regard to the clerical robes, most of our interviewees noted that it is not fully adopted in Full Gospel Church, but gradually becoming the norm. In Kirinyaga South, for example, Bishop Dominic Njenga wears these vestments, unapologetically. No apologies to anybody. He does it. Okay, in Kirinyaga South, that's Mwea. Equally, the immediate former General Overseer, Kadeta, from Mwingi Kitui County, prefers to wear clerical robes whenever he is carrying out religious duties. He returned on medical grounds or in early 2020, and so he's still active. In Kirinyaga West, Reverend Ismail Mwai Mabiu, the pioneer founder of Full Gospel Church of Kenya in the region, and Bishops Kimani and Karugendo are not keen on using the vestments. They may want to prefer the tie and just remain as the one. Whilst Bishops Karugendo and Kimani are silent about these shifting sands in FGCK, Reverend Mwai, who returned in 1988, an elderly senior, insists that FGCK should retain the status quo as wearing clerical garments is tantamount to copying other people. So he is in the old school. Viewed as pioneer and liberationist icon, Reverend Mavio appears to contradict his mass African Pentecostal liberation theology that he uniquely propounds as a measure of empowering everybody to wake up economically, socially, in every way. A liberationist from Pentecostal wing is a great man. Nevertheless, this was just his post-retirement project that equally points to the shifting landscape among his African Pentecostal leadership. Because after retirement, Reverend Mwai Mavi went to teach people how to empower themselves economically, socially, and in every way as the way of God. So you don't just wake up spiritually and grow in every way, family-wise, social-wise, all ways. So that is it. But you can see even in him having returned that early, 1988, he is still demonstrating change. Beyond vestments, the FGCK, like other African Pentecostals, is encouraging theological education as a prerequisite for their leaderships. That is, it is no longer let the Holy Spirit teach pastors and the congregation. Rather, the place of the Holy Spirit is well taken care of. The place of theological education is equally getting taken care of. So we need both. As a matter of fact, there are doctors in theological education in Full Gospel Church of Kenya, which was not the case. These days, there are quite a number of people who have completed doctoral degrees and they are their pastors. And that does not look like you are too secular. Why go for Sundays all over, moving around? Why is it education becoming too much? Why going for it? Yes. Okay, we'll stop there and look at the big man syndrome when we come back. Big man syndrome in Pentecostal churches. Thank you very much. Comment if you have comments.